The night my stepmother threw me out of my own house, it was raining so hard that I could barely see the road. I stood on the porch with one suitcase in my hand. My clothes were still inside. My photographs were still inside. Even my mother's old jewelry box was still inside. But my stepmother had locked the front door. She stood behind the glass, staring at me with a cold smile. "You have 10 minutes to leave," she said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Leave? This is my father's house." She laughed quietly. "Not anymore." I looked at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer to the glass. "Your father is gone. The house belongs to me now." I felt my heart sink. My father had died only 3 days earlier. And somehow, before I had even finished grieving, my stepmother had decided I was no longer welcome. I knocked on the door. "Please, Linda, it's raining. Just let me get my things." She shook her head. "You've taken enough from this family." Enough. I almost laughed. I had spent the last 5 years taking care of my father while she traveled, shopped, and lived her life. I had been the one driving him to appointments. I had been the one cooking his meals. I had been the one sitting beside him during his worst nights. And now she was telling me I had taken too much. The door opened slightly. Linda threw my mother's old photograph onto the porch. It landed face down in a puddle. "Take your memories and go." Then she slammed the door. I stood there in the rain. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then I picked up the photograph. My mother's face was still visible through the water. I wiped it carefully with my sleeve. And that's when I whispered the words that would change everything. "Dad, I wish you had told me the truth. My name is Emily Carter. I was 27 when my father died. Our house stood at the end of a quiet country road, surrounded by tall trees and an old stone fence. It wasn't a mansion, but it was large enough to feel like one. My father had built most of it himself. Every room had a story. The kitchen was where my mother used to bake pies. The living room was where my father taught me how to play chess. The upstairs bedroom was where I spent most of my childhood. After my mother died, my father became quieter. For years, it was just the two of us. Then, when I was 19, he introduced me to Linda. She was charming at first. She brought flowers. She cooked dinner. She laughed at my father's jokes. I wanted to like her. And for a while, I did. But things slowly changed. After they married, Linda began treating the house as if it belonged entirely to her. My mother's photographs disappeared from the walls. My mother's books vanished from the shelves. Even the old piano my mother loved was moved into storage. Whenever I asked why, Linda would smile. "Your father and I are starting a new chapter." I didn't argue. I didn't want to cause problems. Then my father became ill. Everything changed again. Linda suddenly became very busy. She had shopping trips, weekend getaways, friends to visit. And somehow, I became my father's main caregiver. I never complained. He was my father. I loved him. During his final weeks, he could barely walk. One evening, while I was helping him into bed, he grabbed my hand. "Emily," he whispered. "Yes, Dad. There are things you don't know." I smiled sadly. "You don't have to worry about anything." "No." He looked directly into my eyes. You need to listen. His voice was weak. After I'm gone, don't trust everyone who says they love you. I frowned. What are you talking about? He tried to reach toward the nightstand. There was a small wooden box there. Before he could open it, Linda walked into the room. What are you two talking about? My father immediately became silent. Nothing, he said. Linda stared at him. Then she looked at me. Emily, why don't you go downstairs? I left. But something about my father's expression stayed with me. It was fear. 3 days later, my father was buried. The funeral was small. Rain fell softly over the cemetery. I stood beside his grave holding an old photograph. Linda stood several feet away. She didn't cry. Not once. After everyone left, she walked toward me. We need to talk. I looked at her. About what? The house. I stared at her. Now. Yes. Now. She folded her arms. You can't stay here. I thought she was joking. Linda, I live here. You lived here. My stomach tightened. My father just died. And life moves on. Her words were cold. Where am I supposed to go? She shrugged. That isn't my problem. I went home that evening thinking things would calm down. They didn't. Linda had already packed some of my clothes. My suitcase was waiting near the front door. I stared at it. You packed my things. Yes. You can't do this. I just did. Then came the rain. Then the suitcase. Then the locked door. And I spent the night at a small hotel with only $20 in my wallet. I cried until I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up angry. Not because Linda had thrown me out, but because my father had left me with so many unanswered questions. 2 weeks passed. I found a small apartment and started working extra hours. I tried to rebuild my life. Then, one Tuesday morning, I received a phone call. Is this Emily Carter? Yes. My name is Jonathan Reed. I'm your father's attorney. I froze. My father's attorney. Yes. I didn't know he had one. He paused. Your father instructed me to contact you after his death. My heart began beating faster. Why? Because his will is ready to be read. I swallowed. Can't you just tell me what he left me? No. He sounded serious. The will must be read in the presence of the beneficiaries. When? Tomorrow morning. I almost said no. Then I remembered my father's final words. Don't trust everyone who says they love you. I'll be there. The next morning, I walked into Jonathan Reed's office. Linda was already there. She looked surprised to see me. What are you doing here? I looked at her. Apparently, my father wanted me here. Her expression changed. Jonathan entered the room carrying a thick folder. Thank you all for coming. Linda sat beside her attorney. I sat alone. Jonathan opened the folder. This is the last will and testament of Robert Carter. Linda smiled confidently. I assume we can make this quick. Jonathan looked at her. I don't think you'll find it quick. She frowned. He began reading. To my beloved wife, Linda Carter. Linda smiled. I looked down. To my beloved wife, I leave my personal vehicle, all household furniture purchased during our marriage, and sufficient funds to maintain the residence for 1 year. Linda's smile disappeared. What? Jonathan continued. The residence located at 14 Willow Lane shall not pass to Linda Carter. Linda stood. What did you say? Jonathan raised his hand. Please sit down. She slowly sat. He continued. I leave the entire property known as Willow Lane, including the surrounding land, to my daughter, Emily Carter. Silence. I couldn't breathe. Linda stared at me. No. Jonathan continued. I also leave Emily my investment accounts, savings, and the contents of the private safe located behind the library bookshelf. Linda suddenly stood again. That isn't possible. Jonathan looked at her. The will was signed, witnessed, and notarized 6 months ago. Linda's face turned pale. But Robert promised me the house. Jonathan calmly replied. Your husband made several promises during his lifetime. Linda looked at me. You knew. I didn't. You're lying. I swear I didn't. Jonathan opened another envelope. There is more. Linda stopped shouting. Jonathan removed a handwritten letter. This letter was written by Robert Carter and specifically requested to be read to Emily. My hands began shaking. Jonathan looked at me. Are you ready? I nodded. He began reading. My dear Emily, if you are hearing this letter, then I am no longer beside you. I wish I could have given you this information myself. I am sorry. I know you believe I chose Linda over you. I know you think I allowed her to push you away. But the truth is more complicated. For years, Linda tried to convince me that you wanted nothing to do with me. She told me you planned to move away. She told me you were angry with me. I believed her. I was wrong. When I became sick, I finally discovered the truth. You were the one who stayed. You were the one who cared for me. You were the one who loved me when I had nothing to give you. I will never be able to repay you. So I am giving you something that cannot replace me, but may remind you of the home we built together. The house is yours. Not because you are my daughter, but because you earned the right to call it home. There is one more thing. Do not hate Linda. She made terrible choices. But hatred will only keep you trapped in the past. I want you to build a better life. One that belongs completely to you. Love, Dad. By the time Jonathan finished reading, tears were running down my face. Linda was silent. For the first time, she looked frightened. Then Jonathan placed a second document on the table. There's another matter. Linda looked at him. What now? He turned toward her. Mr. Carter also discovered that several valuable items disappeared from the house during the final year of his life. Linda's face changed. Jonathan continued. Those items were documented. He placed photographs on the table. My mother's jewelry. My father's antique watch. Several paintings. Linda stared at them. You're accusing me. No, Jonathan said calmly. I'm telling you that your husband documented everything. Linda's attorney leaned toward her. Don't say anything. She ignored him. You have no proof. Jonathan opened another file. We do. He placed several signed receipts on the table. The room became completely silent. Linda slowly sat down. I looked at her. And suddenly, I understood. My father had known. He had known far more than I ever imagined. After the meeting, Jonathan gave me a small brass key. Your father wanted you to have this. What is it? The library. I returned to Willow Lane that afternoon. For the first time since my father died, I stood in front of the house without fear. The door was unlocked. Linda had already left. I walked into the library. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. My father's books. The old clock. My mother's photograph. I walked toward the bookshelf. Behind the third row of books was a small wooden panel. I removed it. Behind it was a hidden compartment. The key fit perfectly. Inside was a box. I opened it. There were photographs, letters, my mother's wedding ring, and one final note from my father. I opened it with trembling hands. Emily, your mother wanted you to have this when you were old enough to understand its meaning. She believed that a home wasn't made from walls. It was made from the people who filled it with love. I hope you remember that. Whatever happens after I'm gone, never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. You belong wherever your heart feels safe. Love, Dad. I held my mother's wedding ring in my hand. And for the first time since his death, I smiled. Months later, Willow Lane looked different. Not because I renovated it. Not because I bought expensive furniture. But because I finally felt at home. I restored my mother's photographs. I put the piano back in the living room. I planted flowers along the front path. And I kept my father's old chair exactly where it had always been. One evening, there was a knock at the door. It was Linda. She looked completely different. She looked tired. I didn't come to ask for the house, she said. I remained silent. I came to apologize. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Maybe I never would be. But I listened. I was afraid, she admitted. Afraid of losing everything. I looked at her. You had a family. She lowered her eyes. I know. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I never expected. Your father loved you very much. I nodded. I know. She turned toward the driveway. Before leaving, she stopped. He was right about one thing. What? She looked back at me. This house was always supposed to be your home. Then she walked away. I closed the door. That night, I sat beside the window and looked at the garden. The rain had stopped. Moonlight rested on the old stone fence. I held my mother's wedding ring in my hand. And I finally understood what my father had wanted me to learn. An inheritance wasn't always about money. Sometimes, the greatest inheritance was knowing that someone had believed in you. Even after they were gone. And sometimes, the people who try hardest to take your home away from you only teach you how much it truly means. I looked around the house. My house. My mother's house. My father's house. Our home. And whispered, I'm home, Dad. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees. For a moment, it almost sounded like his voice answering me. Welcome home, Emily.